Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the course of Environmental Science. This course is a comprehensive course intended to cover the entire subject, and this would eventually aid to other subjects as well if you've chosen this as your complementary optional subject. Just a brief introduction. I am Moomal Shahab, and when I'm talking about the subject, it's something that I've been studying and also have an experience working in the same field. So I'm basically bachelor's in civil engineering. This I did from NAD University, Karachi, and later I opted for MBA. Specialization was in energy and environmental management. After that, I moved to my work experience, and over the course of time, I realized that this course is very specific and technical in nature. When you're applying this course in your work, for that, I did some technical courses. I am a lead auditor in ISO 14001, which is a specialization in environmental management systems. I'm also a lead auditor in occupational health and safety, which is OSHA's 18001. Apart from that, I did some food safety training courses, and an advanced food safety and training in catering, trained the trainer from HABC, and have worked in UAE in the same field. Moving on to the subject, environment sciences is a subject from group 5, and it is for 100 scores. When we're talking about the preparation time, it's a subject that would not take a lot of time. It does not have a very elaborate materials that you have to really go through a lot of books. So probably one or two books which I would be recommending in the course of time, and that should be enough. And of course, the lectures that you will be listening to and the material that will be provided to you to study is more than enough to cover the subject. Now, when we're talking about why choosing environmental science as an optional subject, we need to understand that you are already studying a portion of environmental science in general science and ability, which is your compulsory subject. And there is a brief misunderstanding that this subject is purely technical in nature, and a lot of people avoid opting for the subject. Just to clarify, if this is a concern for you, that environmental sciences is not a technical subject, it is more about management, and you will realize it that once we go through the course syllabus, you'll realize it's more towards management. It is a very contained course. So there might be other optional subjects where the course is very elaborate. And once you dig into the subject, you realize that you need to do supplementary studies. When you talk about environmental science, it is a subject जिसमें आपको बहुत ज़्यादा अदर सोर्सेज से डिग इन करने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. तो आपके पास एक अगर सब्जेक्ट है, उसका एक चैप्टर है, एक टॉपिक है, उसमें से सारी चीज़ें वेरी वेल कंटेन्ड हैं, एंड यू डोंट रियली नीड टू गो इनटू अ लॉट ऑफ सोर्सेज टू कवर द सब्जेक्ट. एंड अनदर इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग इज़ दैट ये सब्जेक्ट आपको आपके कुछ कंपल्सरी सब्जेक्ट्स में भी हेल्प करता है. कैसे हेल्प करता है? We know that over the past 2-3 years, climate change has been a topic which is very relevant, very current in our governance, in our national policy level, climate change frameworks. उस हिसाब से ये particular subject आपकी understanding towards environmental climate challenges को बेहतर करता है. And when you have a clarity on the subject, जब हम इसको पढ़ेंगे तो you will realize कि आपके करंट अफेयर से भी ये टॉपिक आ सकता है, आपके ऐसे में भी ये टॉपिक आ सकता है. एंड वंस यू हैव अ गुड नॉलेज ऑन दीज सब्जेक्ट्स, आप शायद बाकी कंपल्सरी सब्जेक्ट में भी इसको सपोर्ट कर सकते हैं. जनरल साइंस एंड एबिलिटी में तो काफ़ी सारी चीज़ें हैं जो इसमें से आपको, इफ़ यू कवर इट इन एनवायरमेंटल साइंस, आपको ऑलरेडी जनरल साइंस एंड एबिलिटी कवर हो रहा है. सो दैट इज़ प्रॉब्ली समथिंग दैट इज़ वेरी ईजी फॉर यू टू मैनेज. Apart from that, this subject is also, if you select it with some other optional subjects, so आपकी study time को कम कर सकता है. Now, when you're talking about CSS, of course, time is everything. So अगर आप ऐसे optional subject लेते हैं जो एक दूसरे से they complement each other, that would probably aid into your study. आपका reduce करता है time, और उसमें आप फिर बेहतर कम time में ज़्यादा चीज़ें cover कर सकते हैं. तो अगर आप environmental science ले रहे हैं तो complementary subjects, for example, town planning है, उसमें अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स आर अबाउट सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट, जो कि हम एनवायरमेंटल साइंस में ऑलरेडी कवर कर रहे होते हैं. तो मज़ीद जब आप अर्बन प्लानिंग में जाएंगे, टाउन प्लानिंग में जाएंगे, तो वो भी पूरा वही सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट की बात करता है. तो यू सम हाउ कवर मेजॉरिटी ऑफ द कोर्स. अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट, ज्योग्राफी है. ज्योग्राफी के काफ़ी टॉपिक्स जो है वो उसमें सम हाउ मैच कर जाते हैं, तो यू गेट अ बेटर अंडरस्टैंडिंग. towards the other subjects as well. So environmental science, bottom line, is not a technical subject, it's a management subject or relatively contained course, and it would help in other subjects as well. स्पेसिफिकली जनरल साइंस एंड एबिलिटी के काफ़ी टॉपिक्स जो है इन्वायरमेंटल साइंस में हम डीपली पढ़ेंगे। तो अगर आप इसको इन्वायरमेंटल साइंस में पढ़ लेते हैं तो आपकी जीएसए की स्टडी काफ़ी हद तक कवर हो जाती है। मेन टॉपिक्स जो कि जनरल साइंस एंड एबिलिटी के जो कि इन्वायरमेंटल साइंस के साथ हैं उनमें वी टॉक अबाउट ड्राउट, वी टॉक अबाउट स्मॉग, वी विल टॉक अबाउट वाटर लॉगिंग एंड सैलिनिटी, डिफॉरेस्टेशन, क्लाइमेट चेंज, ग्लोबल वार्मिंग एंड मोस्ट इंपॉर्टेंटली वेस्ट मैनेजमेंट। और ये वो टॉपिक्स हैं जो ना सिर्फ आपके जीएसए में हैं, आपके एनवायरमेंटल साइंस के की क्वेश्चंस भी बनते हैं और नोट्स के क्वेश्चंस भी बनते हैं। Now, when we're talking about the course content that we have to follow, which is given to us by the FPSC, इसमें 8 main chapters हैं, which starts from the history of environmental thought. So इस particular chapter में we will talk about how environment basically started और environmental movements क्या थी and where did they originate from और आज हम उसके तहत कहाँ खड़े हैं. Then we talk about sustainable development issues. This is a very detailed chapter and इसकी understanding आपके बाकी chapters को भी आसान बना देती है. Interdisciplinary nature of environmental science, of course, now we are saying that you can't really have development without incorporating environment into it. So this is a topic जिसमें आपकी ये understanding होती है कि environment related understanding आपको बाकी fields में कैसे support करती है. We talk about environmental pollution. इसमें we're talking about core 4 subjects. We're talking about air pollution, we're talking about water pollution, we're talking about waste, solid waste. ये 3 की environmental pollution के content हैं जो कि हम इसमें की chapter में cover करेंगे. Then we have climate change. What exactly is climate change? And we're also talking about what are the drivers of climate change. तो वो मैं आपको आगे जो है ना इसमें explain करती हूँ. And then there is global initiatives. This is somehow relevant to current affairs कि current development globally environment में क्या होती जा रही है. And we will talk, of course, not just the global perspective, we'll also align it towards the local perspective, which is the Pakistani perspective. And the last is environmental assessment and management. इसमें 2 चीज़ें हैं जो बहुत important है, which is environmental management systems and the health and safety management system, basically environmental impact assessments. तो अगर हम कोर्स की डिटेल्स देखें तो हिस्ट्री ऑफ एनवायरमेंटल थॉट में वी विल स्टार्ट फ्रॉम दी कॉन्सेप्ट फ्रॉम वेयर इट एनवायरनमेंट बेसिकली ओरिजिनेट फ्रॉम. ये चीज़ कहाँ से इम्पॉर्टेंट हुई, क्यों इम्पॉर्टेंट हुई, कैसे इम्पॉर्टेंट हुई और उसकी डेवलपमेंट्स आगे हिस्ट्री में किस तरह रही हैं. इसमें वन ऑफ द मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट थिंग इज़ दैट वी नीड टू अंडरस्टैंड that environmental movement started from some feminist movement which was eco-feminist movement और इसमें हम cover करेंगे eco-feminism को भी. We will then move on to the Industrial and Agricultural Revolution. We will talk about United Nations Conference on Human Environment, 1972, Our Common Future, 1987, Rio Summit, Agenda 21. We will talk in detail about sustainable development, and that we will cover in the Sustainable Development course. Then there is sustainable development issues. Now, when we talk about sustainable development issues, हम बात कर रहे हैं कि ऐसे कौन से challenges हैं जिसके वजह से environment पे impact आता है. And when we talk about latest issues, उसमें सबसे बड़ा issue जो है वो आता है population burst का. So when we're talking about population explosion, we're talking about poverty, we're talking about a lot of waste to manage, we're talking about resources of wastage of resources. और फिर हमारी बढ़ती हुई पॉपुलेशन के साथ हमारी डिमांड्स फ्रॉम द एनवायरनमेंट आर इंक्रीजिंग एंड दैट इज़ ऑफ कोर्स व्हेन यू टॉकिंग अबाउट रिसोर्स यूटिलाइजेशन विच इंक्लूड्स वाटर, विच इंक्लूड्स एनर्जी. और इस वजह से हमारे जो नेचुरल रिसोर्सेज हैं, नेचुरल रिजर्व्स हैं, वो किस तरह डिप्लीट होते हैं. That linked with urbanization and rapid urbanization, हमारी sustainable cities, we're talking about the carrying capacity, the ecological footprint of each of us. हम जितना इस दुनिया में से रिजर्व और रिसोर्स यूज़ करते हैं उसका impact of course negatively environment पे किस तरह वापस जाता है. और eventually of course when you're talking about resource utilization, we will talk about food scarcity, which is again a growing issue and a challenge that we are facing currently. Because अगर आपके natural resource deplete हो रहे हैं, आपका climate change है, आपके flood terrains हैं, आपके frequent drought systems हैं, तो your capacity to produce food would of course be impacted. तो वो एक चीज़ है जो हम SDIs में या इस chapter में cover करेंगे. Interdisciplinary nature of environmental science, this per se as a chapter is not something that needs to be studied independently. हम जहाँ से भी जो हमारे मेन कोर्सेज हैं जब वो कर रहे होंगे तो you will automatically realize that we know that how food experts are also environmental experts and how do they link with each other. Similarly, sustainable growth and sustainable cities and urbanization में environmental experts का क्या role है. Or when you're talking about policy level तो हम देखते हैं कि now and that we realize जो पाकिस्तान भी अभी face करता है that you have less of environmental experts at policy making level. So ये interdisciplinary nature as per se chapter हम इस तरह detail में नहीं करेंगे, but throughout the course we are already covering all of this, and wherever there is something significant we will be pointing it out. Then we talk about the chapter of environmental pollution, and as I said, there are 3-4 key pollution areas that we will be discussing. Major is in air pollution, water pollution, soil pollution, solid waste. We will be talking about deforestation and desertification. There is a very important concept of eutrophication. We will do it in detail, and we'll understand the impact of pollution, especially air pollution, which includes global warming, which includes climate change, ozone depletion, and acid rain. We will move on to climate change. Climate change, may again, we will focus on what are the drivers of climate change, what are the indicators of climate change hota kya hai, kis tarah se hota hai. And the key is that this is not a very complicated concept. So once we understand what is climate change and wo kyun hota hai process eventually, why do we always talk about climate change? So you will automatically understand the key issues related to climate change और उसको हम किस तरह से mitigate and adapt कर सकते हैं. So there's a huge concept which is very prevalent in Pakistan and globally, especially after the floods last year, of adaptation and mitigation. The concept of adaptation and mitigation is very simple. Mitigation है कि आप उसको किस तरह से कम कर सकते हैं, mitigate कर सकते हैं. When you talk about adaptation, we need to understand कि काफ़ी ऐसे globally climate change के impact हो चुके हैं जिसको हम reverse नहीं कर सकते. We can't immediately reverse things that we've already done over the course of decades and centuries, but we try to adapt to it. So adaptation strategies क्या होनी चाहिए? We will look into the global perspective. We will also look into the local perspective. Moving on to the governance, environmental governance में there are some legal frameworks जो हम specific to Pakistani perspective से पढ़ेंगे. We will talk about the Pakistan Environmental Protection Act. We will talk about the National Conservation Strategy. हम national determinant contributions को भी पढ़ेंगे. हम waste management के कुछ हमारी policies हैं like solid waste management, hospital waste management, hazardous waste management. इनको हम briefly जो है discuss करेंगे. And again, this all will also be covered in supplement to your solid waste management concept as well. When we talk about global initiatives, इसमें there are a couple of agreements that are ratified by Pakistan. हम उनको discuss करेंगे. We will talk about Convention on Biological Diversity. We will talk about the United Nations Framework or Convention on Climate Change, UNFCCC. इसके बारे में हम थोड़ा डिटेल में जाएंगे. We'll go into further details to Kyoto Protocol, the Montreal Protocol, and the Desertification Convention. And the last would be environmental assessment and management. इसमें हम दो key concepts पढ़ेंगे, the environmental impact assessment and what is understood by risk assessment. So whenever we're talking about assessments and management, whether it's environment, whether it's health and safety, the core concept is risk analysis. अगर आपको risk analysis आता है, whether it's environmental risk, whether it's let's say health and safety risk, even when we're talking about financial concepts, उसमें भी financial risks होते हैं. Once you understand how to analyze the risks, you can always determine a management plan. तो इस particular chapter में हमारा focus रहेगा कि हम risks को identify करें, categorize करें और उसके बाद उसके accordingly एक management plan बनाए जो prioritize हो according to the risks prioritized that we have done already. When we talk about environmental assessment and management, it's very easy. It's a very short chapter. इसमें हम कुछ flow charts के through आपको the entire environmental management plan किस तरह बनेगा, क्या उसमें risk analysis होते हैं, वो करके एक key concept है. Once you grab that concept, it will be very easy to translate it into the paper. पेपर के लिहाज से कुछ चीज़ें हैं जो कि ज़्यादा important हैं. We will try to focus more in detail towards it, but overall this particular lecture जो आप आगे सारे course wise देखेंगे उसमें एक चीज़ है कि आपको ज़्यादा डिटेल में मज़ीद और sources से help या aid करने की ज़रूरत नहीं पड़ेगी. This will be an all-inclusive course, and my aim would be कि जो recommended books हैं, एक या दो, इससे ज़्यादा नहीं, उसी में से if you want to do some value addition, you will always be able to do that. When we talk about the paper, अगर आप कुछ साल पहले के papers देखें, let's say we'll discuss in detail all the past papers. However, just for your understanding and introduction to this course, um, in art chapters में से, when we talk about the chapters, in art chapters में से 4 or 5 chapters cover the entirety of the paper जो आपको attempt करना होगा. The more important chapters जिसमें से questions ज़्यादातर आते हैं, and if you see a couple of papers in the past, वो होंगे सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट इश्यूज में से. ना सस्टेनेबल डेवलपमेंट इश्यूज की अगर हम बात करें, सो देयर इज़ ऑलवेज अ वेरी फ्रीक्वेंट क्वेश्चन ऑन बायोडाइवर्सिटी लॉस. Biodiversity loss, urbanization, sustainable cities पे questions are more frequent. When we talk about the environmental pollution, इसमें air pollution और solid waste management और and eutrophication, ये questions आपको 20 mark के questions भी मिलेंगे और आपको notes में भी मिलेंगे. So these are two chapters जो कि on an average, if you see the papers 23K, 22K, 21K, so this makes around 40 marks. यानी दो questions आपके 40 marks के इन दो chapters से easily cover होते हैं. Apart from that, आपके notes का एक 8 mark question ही इनमें से बन जाता है. Other than that, if you see the environmental governance, तो इसमें जो हमारी policies हैं, वो recently they've started asking questions on the Pakistan policy frameworks. That could be the Environmental Protection Act. That could be the National Conservation Strategy, or या solid waste management. So when we're talking about solid waste management, उसमें of course we need to understand कि पाकिस्तान का legal framework किस तरह उसको cover करता है. And apart from that, environmental assessment and management is also one of the chapters. Just say almost every year एक या दो questions आते हैं. तो आपका अगर 4 chapters, 5 chapters अगर आपकी इसमें से you cover these topics, it covers your question paper very easily. But the key is that you need to understand the entire concept of it. So it's not just straight away writing what you study, it's also application of what you're studying in global and local perspective. And that is something that adds value to your paper. Whenever we talk about climate change, remember it's not regional specific. ये ग्लोबल इशू है, तो इसको हमेशा ग्लोबल पर्सपेक्टिव के साथ स्टार्ट करके आपको रीजनल पर्सपेक्टिव की तरफ आना है, और रीजनल पर्सपेक्टिव के बाद आपको आना है लोकल पर्सपेक्टिव की तरफ. और यही चीज़ जो है वो पेपर में पसंद भी की जाती है, बिकॉज दैट शोज़ that as a student you've studied the global perspective and you're applying the same to your local perspective. तो 3-4 chapters cover करने से आपके quite a lot of questions are covered in your paper. We will discuss the paper strategies, and we will discuss the questions later in our next module. However, for now, the bottom line would be that this is a very contained course, and you will be able to understand a lot of things very quickly. So once you understand the key concept, इसको लिखने में, इसकी डिटेल में जाने में या एप्लीकेशन में, it won't take much of a time for you. And apart from that, doing this course would also help your concepts where you can apply the same in case if your essay questions relate to climate change, या आपके current affairs में climate related questions या climate related policies आती हैं. So hopefully when we start with the course, you will, over the pace of time, you will understand that it's a very simple course to grab your understanding on, and hopefully it will be helping you out with your other chapters. Thank you.